Some brain malfunction. I've done a number on the place. It worked people up.
Inspiration has this reputation of being dramatic, like a lightning, a sudden burst of ideas, a sudden clarity, or a revelation. But in my experience, inspiration is rarely that loud. It doesn't usually kick down the door. It slips in, it arrives only when you stop trying so hard to look for it. The word inspiration comes from the Latin word inspirare, which means to breathe into. So it is not about control and it's not about force. It's about allowing space. It's about breathing life into something. In one of his interviews, David Bowie actually talked about it. He says something about how mornings are a unique time untouched by the world, a fragile few hours where the mind is still soft and unshaped enough to allow the organic flow of new ideas. I'll show you.
Well, I suppose since I stopped doing drugs and drinking, I think probably I really prize getting up early in the morning, which is something that happens. I now find for years now I've gotten up regularly at 6 in the morning. It doesn't matter what time I go to bed, I still get up, which is not a great thing actually when I'm rehearsing, because you rehearse pretty late. But I still get up at 6. I enjoy the fact of seeing the light come up with me, and then utilising the daylight and what it brings and the kind of message that it brings. It's a different message from when you're living in twilight hours, and things get very symbolic representationally. If you live through the twilight hours and the early hours of the morning, there's a shadow to your life all the time. Psychologically, you're in the dark as well as physically in the dark. There's something that I find very uplifting and optimistic and creative about working and being very much in the daylight.
We are terrified of boredom. We treat it like a flaw, something we must escape immediately, as if the absence of stimulation means something is wrong with us. But in reality, boredom is not emptiness. It is not a void. It's simply a quiet doorway the mind crosses when it stops being so flooded. Think of it like mental fasting. We feed our brains constantly. We consume so much content. We see so many things. We get inspired by so many things. We scroll, we text, but we never have time to digest anything. Once we stop feeding our brains, even for just a tiny little bit, something changes. We can suddenly hear our thoughts again. We can notice sounds, we can notice textures, we can notice questions that were always there, just buried under mountains and mountains of stimulation.
And it seemed to me, especially, I don't know, in the last year with the kind of...
People don't usually lose inspiration because their lives are too boring. They lose inspiration because life is a little bit too loud. Children actually understand this much better than us adults. They say, "I'm bored," right before they make up a new language, invent a new game, start a new drawing. The boredom is more like a spark. It is a pivot, an invitation for something new. But us adults, we replace the creative response to boredom with consumption. We panic, so we fill the space, and we kill the simmer. Some ideas just don't come instantly. They need time, they need heat, they need stillness. Boredom or downtime or time without stimulation is like that low flame under the pot, that slow simmer that lets ideas blend, transform, soften. Remove the pot too quickly and nothing happens, nothing deepens, nothing forms. I think of inspiration a little bit like baking. I am not a good baker, by no means, but I do know that ready-made dough brings predictable results. That's why we should always go back to the basics, to the raw ingredients, to flour, to water, to silence, to patience, awareness. Raw ingredients that have infinite potential. When we get burned out, we tend to fall back into defaults, to old habits of creation. These defaults are a result of us not being able to remove stimulation, to be present, to allow the world around us become our inspiration, our source of ideas, our ingredients, our raw materials, the raw potential. One practice I do daily that keeps me awake, alert, and ready to observe the inspiration the world has to offer is this little practice I call the 3 things method. It's not really a name, it's just for this video's sake, let's call it the 3 things method. It's a very, very simple exercise, but I do swear by it. It completely changed the way I look at inspiration and how hard I take those days where I feel a bit empty of ideas. It goes like this. 1 thing you notice, 1 thing you feel, and 1 thing you imagine. 1 thing I notice is this tube of white paint that I cut in half because there was a hole in the back of the tube and the paint wasn't coming out right. Okay, there it is. It has paper towel over it because it's leaking everywhere. That is the half-cut tube of white paint. 1 thing I feel, if I try to tune in with myself, I feel remorse. I feel a little pain in my stomach. I feel a little bit unsettled. I think the way I cut it, also how satisfying it was to cut it, this metallic material of the tube. It felt good to cut it, and I feel a little bit unsettled. This is what I'm feeling, okay? 1 thing I imagine. I can imagine maybe that when I cut this tube in half, everything around me was also cut in half. And when I noticed and I tried to reassemble it, reconnect the things, they could not be put back together anymore. And everything changed. I could imagine that once I cut this tube in half and I tried to squeeze out the white paint that remained, instead of white paint came out a little fish, and the fish started flying around the house. And when I tried to talk to it and ask that he would stop flying around the house because it's bothering my cat, he would just shake his head and say that he does not follow orders given by humans. I could just go on and on. The point is not the specific story I'm telling, obviously. It's how ideas and these little sparks of inspiration that you can grasp and you can take hold of and try and see what speaks to you, what invigorates something in you, and you want to continue and explore, continue and develop, is so easy to get. Let's say I could notice this gold door handle that you cannot see, but I can see this gold door handle, and I could sense a feeling of nostalgia. And I could imagine, let's say, how this Spanish old woman, very wrinkled, smelling like cigarettes, went to her local hardware store in Madrid, Spain, whatever, and specifically chose this one because she thought that it matched the view beautifully. And after she had it installed, she took her time every day, squeezing that door handle and going outside to the balcony and taking a deep, deep breath. So again, I am completely losing it. 3 things method. I swear by it. Try it. You would not regret it. Noticing things wakes your senses. Feeling things wakes your truth. Imagining things wakes your inner world. Haruki Murakami, who is my favorite author of all times, describes inspiration the way a scientist would describe observation. He says, reflect on what you see. Remember though, that to reflect is not to rush to determine the rights and wrongs and merits and demerits. Try to consciously refrain from value judgments. What's important is retaining the specifics of a situation. I can go back later, when my feelings have settled, and only then, if needed, draw conclusions. He's talking about patience, about the willingness to let experiences simmer. Every day the world breathes into you, through colors, through sounds, through strange encounters, through conversations and mistakes, and you breathe out something only you can create, which is the beauty of it. In a way it is like a miracle, but it is also a relationship. It's a rhythm, it's like heartbeats. If you listen close enough, if you pay enough attention, it will always be there.